Tropical Storm Karl forms in the Bay of Campeche off the coast of Mexico. Now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 12th. Well, we have another storm, Tropical Storm Karl, which in part has formed out of Julia's ashes in the southern Gulf of Mexico, and the remnants of Bulletin continue to be recognizable, if nothing else, out in the South Indian Ocean. 74 storms have formed so far this year. So here is a look at Karl, a closer look at least in the Atlantic there. It's in the very southern part of the Bay of Campeche, the 11th storm of the Atlantic hurricane season this year. And it's expected to meander around that bay region and turn north and west and south and eventually reach Mexico again as a weak tropical storm probably. In the eastern Pacific, the other area of interest on the southern side, still with a low chance of development, we're giving it 20% at this moment in time for potential development off the coast of southern Mexico. In the western Pacific, still a flurry of activity that hasn't yet materialized, but high chances being given by the Force 13 analyst team for the two areas in the middle there, one just off the coast of Luzon in the Philippines, and the other one not far from the Mariana Islands, expected to head towards Taiwan, and two others either side with a moderate chance. Crazy times. And in the southern hemisphere, ex-Bulletin continuing onwards and not doing very much. I think eventually we'll be switching back to the North Indian Ocean to take a look at that next area of interest that might form in the medium range model runs. Let's take a look at the satellite imagery then, and you can see Karl quite clearly. It's inherited a lot of Julia's energy, at least half, probably a little bit more than that, and it's still got a decent size about it. So you could call it Julia Part 2, but it's not directly linked to the storm, and so it has been named Karl. There's the look from the eastern Pacific side, and you can see the rest of what was left of Julia there off the coast of southern Mexico. The moisture plume exerting out of Karl already over Florida, but it will stay in that general area and will not impact any other regions apart from pretty much Veracruz in Mexico. Of course, rainfall could spread quite drastically in some areas, but of course we expect that the main rainfall areas will be near the landfall zone. Along all of these coastlines, we're probably not expecting a huge amount of rain over the next 5 to 7 days. I would suggest probably maximums, isolated maximums of 8 to 10 inches. That's up to 250 millimeters. Here's some more imagery of the storm right now and that area of interest on that southern side, being separated by Central America there, and you can see on that infrared imagery, Karl is a bit of a mess, and it took a while for it to develop today. Even the circulation was looking not so great even earlier on today. I think it's becoming a little bit more convincing now, and a little bit of convection blowing up where the center is at this time, and I expect that this storm will gather a little bit more intensity. National Hurricane Center I think are forecasting 50 miles per hour or 45, I'm not sure, but nonetheless only a weak to moderate tropical storm watch in effect for parts of Mexico. In the western Pacific, you can see these two systems, the dominant ones, the one off the coast of Luzon and the one near Guam, both gyrating sort of around a larger common low pressure area, and you see some convection blowing up in the South China Sea as well. That's where that next system to the west could form, and I think that has a decent chance too. You can also see it on the right hand side of the image here. On the bottom of the image you might be able to make out the swirling remnants of Bulletin. Its convection is way gone from it now, and I think it will be unrecognizable by this time tomorrow. And the southern hemisphere, just looking down there in the Australian region, there are those two frontal systems that blew through Fiji and those other Pacific islands. They both had a chance of becoming tropical cyclones briefly. The first one hasn't, the second one is about to develop, but won't be tropical, I think we're pretty sure. So surface temperatures then, and this is what the Eastern Pacific looks like right now, and you can see there decent temperatures mostly across the coast of Mexico, and out to sea in those lower latitudes there's still ample time and opportunity for more storms. In the Atlantic, of course, you can see where Karl is, over at least 28 degrees Celsius waters. The Caribbean is still piping hot for potential late season activity, and even further north as well towards the Bahamas, and out there towards Bermuda and more open areas of the Atlantic, and up the Gulf Coast as well of the United States, and off the US southeast too. Still chance for more storms. North Indian Ocean, you can see there 28 to 30 degrees Celsius, one or two areas a little bit higher than that, ahead of that potential system that are in long range models. And in the Western Pacific, where all of those systems are going on, warm sea surface temperatures touching 30 degrees in many parts of the Philippine Sea and in the South China Sea, particularly off the coast of the Philippines, and those warmer SSTs continuing further north. 26 degrees temperatures are just getting loose of Japan now, they are starting to retreat. In terms of the anomalies, you can see here once again the La Nina well in effect still. The Western Pacific above average generally, the Eastern Pacific generally a little bit, and in the Atlantic quite a bit there as well, particularly in some key areas northeast of the Bahamas. Caribbean only a little bit above average, but you look at the oceanic heat content, those deep reds in the Caribbean Sea. If you get a storm track that goes just south of Jamaica through the Western Caribbean there, that has a massive potential for big intensification. But we've not got anything on the charts yet. Western Pacific still looking decent in the usual typhoon alley region, and the Eastern Pacific has been struggling all year but has still produced so many storms this far. I think, what is it, 16 or 18 storms. This is the GFS short range, and you can see there it pretty much echoes the National Hurricane Center's forecast actually, so if you haven't seen that forecast, GFS pretty much nails it there. It's generally a movement northwards, it wraps around a little bit better, turns westwards, then dipswards, and eventually makes landfall in probably Veracruz, weakening as it makes landfall. Indeed, the NHC forecast I think is barely having it as a tropical storm by the time it makes landfall in that short range. And here is the Western Pacific. You can see those two systems, the one in the South China Sea and the one in the Philippine Sea. The one off the Philippines dies off very, very quickly. And there it is, the main one, the one that was near Guam, and there it is affecting Taiwan near the end of that 5-day period. GFS has been keen on that for quite a while, but there is still a lot of uncertainty about its projected track. It could blow through the strait there and move into the South China Sea, or it could still veer north of Taiwan and get sucked up towards the northeast, but that's a less likely scenario. Looking at the rainfall estimates over this 7-day period, from all three systems you'll be able to see these rainfall impacts. The Philippines, of course rainfall already occurring at the moment, so that's why we're not seeing as high totals compared to previous days. But look ahead to parts of Taiwan and parts of Vietnam that could still get in excess of 24 inches of rain there according to that latest forecast. That's 600 millimeters, and nearly the same amount in Vietnam as well from these disturbances. And in the Philippines, even in that next 7-day period in Luzon, then we are looking at potentially up to 250 to 300 millimeters of rain, which will come not all at the same time, a little bit now and quite a bit more later on from the next storm. Very complex situation there. In the longer range, you can see a brief TS there, just briefly reaching the coast of western Mexico, and then another system forming there behind it in that later period, day 5 to 10, and then gets hit by those winds that move through that channel, and then moving out towards the southwest. So a brief storm that ends up getting blasted by wind shear, doesn't have a very long life there, and just another storm to go onto that list if it happens in the Eastern Pacific. Look at the Westpac, that typhoon that makes landfall in Taiwan, then it too gets shafted down towards the west. No remnants will survive, I don't think. And then maybe another system tries to form there, and eventually it gets the better of the conditions, and there it is, becoming a typhoon again. Another typhoon hot on the heels of that first one, if the GFS is to be believed here, by the time we get to the end of this 10-day period. That second one, the date of formation around the 21st if that happens, so be on the lookout. But first we've got to get through that other typhoon. Busy times. Indian Ocean, take a look at this. Potential formation on the 18th or the 19th of October now in the Andaman Sea is what the GFS is saying again. It reverted from the Bay of Bengal and moving north of the Andaman Islands and possibly becoming a hurricane force storm there as it sweeps into the Bay of Bengal. It's been calling for something like this for days on end, and it is creeping closer to the forecast period, so chances are slowly increasing. Well, that's the serious stuff over and done with right now. You can scan the barcode and it will take you straight to the Force 13 merch store, where you can request individual or full season animations bespoke on request, and of course our actual merch, as well as the still waiting for Hone t-shirt, which I think will be in fashion for quite a long time. In the silly range then, this is day 10 through day 16, and potential for another little shocker here in the long range. It's the first time we've seen this come up, but GFS wants a Atlantic storm again in the southwest Caribbean. Just spins out of nothing now on the 26th of October and makes landfall very quickly near the border between Nicaragua and Costa Rica as a probably moderate tropical storm there, but it is right at the very end of that forecast period. What's that, 15 days from now before it makes landfall, or 16? So that's an extremely long way out and very little confidence. That second typhoon that GFS is touting makes landfall in the very same place, actually, in southern Taiwan. So that would be a bad scenario if that happened to play out, but it is very long range still, and a very uncertain scenario means that even the medium and short range to an extent is very uncertain in the Western Pacific. So I'd pay no notice really to any of this, but I guess it shows you one of the possible scenarios of what might happen. And let's take a look at the Indian Ocean for that other cyclone, and you can see there developing again and possibly strengthening and moving a little bit further west than what we were looking at yesterday in the forecast, potentially striking near Visakhapatnam. And apart from that, nothing else in the Indian Ocean there for that period, which is good news. And indeed nothing else in the Atlantic for those who are wondering about the rest of the picture that we didn't see. No sign of any further activity, possibly one or two weak rotations off the southeast United States. Well then, on this day, a historic one actually, October 12th, 1979, will probably always be remembered for Typhoon Tip's peak, where it reached sustained winds of near 190 miles per hour probably, and most notably its recon found pressure of 870 millibars. Oh dear, I cocked that one up. 870 millibars, which is a worldwide all-time record. There is possibility that the recon didn't catch the peak of Tip even, and the pressure may have been even lower when it did peak on that fateful day. Back to this year, and now the next name on the Atlantic we're looking out for is Lisa, followed by the first usage of Martin if we get there. In the Eastern Pacific, the next name is Roslyn, and in the Central Pacific we are still waiting for Hone. In the Western Pacific we are still waiting for Sonka. We've been waiting for quite a bit here for one of these systems to develop. Of course, the Philippines did name one of those areas of interest Mai not long ago. That was the eastern one near the Mariana Islands. In North Indian Ocean, the next name is Sitrang. In the Australian region, Darien, the Southwest Indian Ocean, Chiniso, and the South Pacific, Hale. That's all for tonight's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow night with another update.